Hello there. Welcome back. We've already got 8 people watching, which is awesome. So thank you for joining us. I'm Colin Munro, and this is my friend Tony. Hello, Tony.
Hello?
Have you had a good week?
Oh, yeah. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So last week we were talking about the upcoming course that we are going to do, um, and that we're working on.
hmm
And we were saying that the first module is we were working on the first module at that time, and now that is live. So everybody can try that out. If you go to the website englishlanguageclub.co.uk, you'll see a link. It's currently called the Logic of English, but we are going to need to change that name. But it is called that for now. Yeah, so check that out. The first module and the first 5 lessons are ready to go. Yeah, so do you want to talk about lesson, the next module that we've been working on now?
Yeah, the actual course. So we have a few ideas, kind of maybe 3 ideas that we feel are they really kind of make English make sense. They're the kind of underlying simple rules that really make all the other rules kind of fit together. A lot of people, when they think about English, they think, oh, it's got so many exceptions, it doesn't follow its own rules, it's got a lot of irregularities. And that's true, but there is a logic behind it all that
Yes.
does kind of make sense. And that's, I think, what we're so excited to share. Can you
Yes.
share with us what some of those core exciting ideas are?
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing is the importance of the auxiliary verbs. Um,
Yes.
Now, don't go anywhere. I know it's starting to talk grammar terms, which can be boring and confusing, but I think that's because they haven't been explained properly in the
Yeah.
past. So yeah, auxiliary verbs are really important because they tell us the tense of the verb. I think when we think about tense, we put too much emphasis on the form of the main verb, when actually it's the auxiliary verb that's the most important thing.
Mhm.
Um, uh, so simple tenses have the auxiliary verb do. Continuous tenses have the auxiliary verb to be,
Mhm.
and perfect tenses have the auxiliary verb to have.
Yeah.
Um, and then the I think another, and then yeah. So another thing is the order of those main types of words: the auxiliary verb, the subject, and the main verb. Defines what the meaning of the sentence, whether it's a positive sentence, a negative sentence, or a question.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, yeah, that's the first sort of main key thing, and then tense. People often get confused about tense. So, but really, when you understand, there's two things in a tense. Do you want to talk about what they? Because it was really you that sort of told me about this.
Well, this is one of my most one of the ideas I get most excited about when it comes to having English, whether it's confusing or honestly very simple. Every tense has a two-word name, right?
Mm,
It's present simple, future continuous, past perfect, whatever, right? And each of those words tells us part of what you need for the tense, but not everything, right? We sometimes you hear this a lot. You say, "Oh, you need to put that in the past tense," but there isn't
mm,
a past tense. There are
yeah,
several
like
past tenses.
which one?
Um, yeah, and so which just knowing past isn't enough to not even just to be able to say it, but to be able to structure your sentence right, to be able to pick which auxiliary verb you use even, right, or whether you use an auxiliary verb. And so
Mm,
that's actually a really it's an area that, because we teach 8 or 9 or 12 tenses instead of those parts, that's a lot. Like memorizing, the core seven, or somebody will say there's 12 tenses, there's different lists. That's a lot of tenses to memorize. But there's only two parts,
Hmm.
and each of the two parts only has three different ways it can go.
Right.
So we call the two parts time and aspect, or in the course we're talking about the time of the action and the type of action
Right. So
that the verb
time would
represents.
be past, present, future, as people are aware of, and then the aspect would be
So aspect is simple or continuous or perfect,
right.
which are those are words we've used a lot. And between those two, it kind of makes a grid, right? You've got past, present, and future, and you've got simple, continuous, and perfect. And between those, everywhere on the grid, it gives you all of the tenses that you would use.
So three
Um,
times three makes a grid of 9 tenses.
Yes. And again, so some people are immediately going to say, well, my teacher said there were seven tenses, or my teacher said there were 12 tenses. And so one of the things that we need to kind of keep reminding people in this course is we are focusing on the basic rules. And that doesn't mean that this is a beginner course, because it really isn't.
We
It's
should
for
really
people
say
who
foundational
exactly. Well,
parts.
it's the foundational. It is the basic rules that kind of make all the other rules fit together. That sometimes we don't actually cover. Last week we talked about phonics, and that a lot of times even native speakers don't learn phonics. They don't learn those very basic rules for pronunciation, and so later on, it's a lot harder to kind of fit all of the different rules together when you don't know the basic ones.
Hmm.
So, what we're going to be talking about is so let's start with time, right? Very simple. Did an event happen in the past, in the present, or in the future? It seems easy, and in a way it is, and it helps us decide, for instance, what form of the main verb and what form of the auxiliary we use.
Hmm.
But it's actually even a little bit the way I like to think of it is the time part of tense isn't specifically talking about when the action happened. It's talking about when am I talking about the
Yeah.
action. And this is important because just because I'm using a present tense, like present perfect, like I have
Hmm.
eaten breakfast already,
Yeah.
um, that doesn't mean that breakfast is happening now. The action was actually in the past. But because I'm using the present time, I'm talking about right now,
Yeah.
right? And so in the past, if I'm talking about something that has happened in the past, I'll use the past tense. But if in the past I'm talking about something that happened even further back in the past, there's another tense that you use for that,
Yeah.
right?
So before we
Then,
go any further, can I just mention? Somebody said
yeah.
in the comments that there's 12 tenses. I think it's Fio.
Mm,
Fio. It says it has 12 tenses. Because we did
mm,
just say 3 times 3 makes 9,
it's nine.
but there's those are the continuous and the perfect, and then some tenses can be both continuous and perfect. So that gives us
Yes,
another 3 to make 12. So you're right, Fio. There is 12
absolutely right.
tenses. We just hadn't got onto that yet.
Yes.
Um,
So that was actually
but
what I guess we never quite finished saying that these rules are very foundational,
yes.
and we're not going. If we spend all the time talking about the exceptions to these rules, then they're not going to be very helpful.
Yeah,
So we're
and this
starting
is
with
what happens in most classrooms. I
exactly,
think we
exactly
spend too much time talking about the exceptions, and then we lose the
the
fundamental
simplicity.
simplicity. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So
And so that's important here. There are if you take these three times and three aspects and you fit them together in a grid, there's nine tenses that are super easy to create. There is an extra three that it's in there. We will be talking about that. We probably even you just talked about it about it's both continuous and perfect at the same time. That's the extra three to make up the 12.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you said then about it's not about when the action happens, it's about the way you're talking about it, because
Right.
and
When I'm
that's
talking about it.
particularly true with the present or all of the perfect tenses,
Yes.
and those are, I think, particularly difficult to understand because for exactly that reason. Present perfect, is not really about well, you're not really
It's
talking.
about the present, but the action isn't in the present. You're
Yeah,
talking about the present, but the action actually happened in the past. And that, again, that makes this so much simpler.
yeah.
The time doesn't necessarily refer to when the action happened, though usually it is. If you're using past simple, the action is in the past. If you're using future simple, the action is in the future. But sometimes, for instance, we use a present tense to talk about the future. Like, I plan to go to the movies tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
The actually going to the movies is in the future, but I'm talking about right now, and I'm talking about my plans right now.
Hmm.
And that's why I use a present tense instead of a future tense,
Yeah.
right? So that does, I think, make it a little bit easier to see that part of tense, the time part of it, by thinking, when am I talking about, instead of just when does the action happen. The
So
other side of it, or go ahead.
go on. Well, yeah, just quickly then. I was just going to say we've got 25 people watching, so let us
Oh,
know.
welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Let us know where you're from, and if are there any tenses that you find difficult, or that you'd like us to talk a little bit more about. Let us know what you want us to talk about in the rest of this stream, because that's what the live streams are all about. Just talk. I want to engage with you. We don't have too much prepared. I just want to respond to the comments.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you do that, we'll respond.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, actually, I wanted to respond to Fyo here was saying that, yes, the English has 12 tenses, but mostly used 9. And this is one of the things that's hard and complicated, is lots of different books will say a different number of tenses.
Yeah.
I've seen people argue that English only has 5 tenses or 7, and then sometimes they're talking about the most commonly used tenses. Sometimes they're talking about more complicated tenses. And again, this is why English can be so difficult. Is people focus on different things. They focus on exceptions and the kind of the small details.
Yeah.
And what we really want to do is focus on broader strokes that are easy to understand the individual pieces of, so that you first of all, that you have a foundation, but also you have the pieces to build on top of to continue to improve your English, right?
Exactly.
So Fio, you're absolutely right. There's 12 tenses. Often we talk about 9 commonly used ones, and we're going to explain why that 9 and 12 number works that way, right? So aspect. Aspect is a little bit trickier, and
so this is the part. Just to clarify, aspect. We're talking about whether it's a simple tense, a continuous tense, or a perfect tense, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is weird, and oftentimes this is not something that people teach in English. I actually learned this concept when I learned a completely different language, and to me it makes a lot of things make a lot more sense, right? So aspect. One way of thinking about this is it's the kind of action or the type of action. Is it an action that's ongoing? That's the continuous tense, right? It is happening over time. Or a perfect tense is something that we're talking about the results of, the effect of. And simple, some people say it's something that only happens once, or it happens all the time, normally. And that's true. Like, that is one way of looking at it. And a lot of people, I think, will say, oh, well, I heard that this is the definition of perfect, or this is the definition of continuous. And we're not arguing with that. We're presenting a simple way of looking at it. It's a different way of looking at it. It's not a new definition. It's a different way of thinking about it that we think will make it easier and will make it easier to fit the pieces together. So the way we are thinking, we want to explain aspect is basically, when does the action start and finish? When does it happen relative to when you're talking about? Like a continuous tense, whatever point I'm talking about, the action actually happened before and doesn't finish until after. Right now, we are live streaming
Mm-hmm.
because the action started, what, 15 minutes ago,
Yep.
and won't stop for however long we go. So right now, I'm talking about now, so it's present, but the action started in the past, it's in the present, and it will be in the future. That's what the continuous means. The action is in the middle when I'm talking about. Last week, we were live streaming when we were answering questions
Mm-hmm.
because I'm talking about the past last week,
Mm-hmm.
but the action of live streaming at the time I'm talking about had already started and it continued on for a little bit and then it stopped. But at the time I was talking about, it was in the middle of happening.
Yeah.
That's what a continuous aspect is. And any of the tenses that says continuous, that's what it means. That when you are talking about it, it's in the middle of happening. It's already started and it hasn't finished yet.
Yeah, so there's sort of 2 points of time that we're referring to. There's the actual point of time we're talking about, and then the wider time around it in
Exactly.
the continuous.
And this is why I think the continuous makes more sense when you think of it this way. Not that, because a lot of times people will tell you the continuous tense means it's happening right now.
Not true.
And that's not true. Because, for instance, I could say, I'm reading a really good book right now. Well, I'm not physically reading because I'm live streaming. Live streaming. But I started reading the book in the past, and I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
I won't finish reading this book until later. So it's in the middle of happening, even though it's not happening right this minute.
Yeah.
It
But
started in the past.
if you do want to talk about something that's happening right now, then present continuous is probably the tense you want to use.
Exactly.
So that's
and
where
that's
the
why
confusion comes from.
Exactly. And it's fine to teach people, that it means right now, but then you have to talk about all these exceptions, right? And so that's
Yeah.
what we are saying. The simple truth behind continuous is it means it's something that has, when you're talking about, so past, present, or future, it's already started and it hasn't finished yet. So it's in the middle, right? So like, say a 10-year-old would say, I am growing up, because they've been growing up all their lives and they're not done yet. But they're not talking about how much they're physically growing at that moment. They're just saying that, yeah, I'm in the middle of it. It's all around me.
Or really they're saying, in that sense, they're saying it's still happening. It's not really important when it started or when it's going to finish. It's about the fact that right now it's happening.
And well, it's about the fact that it has been going on and that it will continue to be going on. Yes, exactly. So Tomato brought up that the present tense is easy, but past and future suddenly become more difficult. And that's exactly the problem that we are trying to help by these 2 kind of simple rules. Like, remember, time refers to when you're talking about it, and aspect is when it happened relative to that. So, for instance, when I was 10, I was growing up, right? It's just as simple. At the time I'm talking about, when I was 10, I was growing up. The action of growing started before I was 10, and it kept on going after I was 10. But I used the continuous because at that time, when I was 10, it was in the middle of growing. So was past, growing is the continuous. When I'm 45, I will not be growing, right? Because that growing action will not be ongoing. It won't have started and stopped. It'll already have finished, right?
Right, but you're still talking in the present continuous tense there. You're just using it in the negative form.
No, when I'm 45, I will not be growing.
Yeah.
Right? Right? The future will, yes.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's future continuous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry.
So
yeah.
So that's really kind of where these help us out here. Is they kind of demystify. They break the present being easy and past and future being hard. Right. So that's an excellent comment, and hopefully that's exactly the kind of thing we are going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
It is difficult. It is difficult to really explain it in a live stream like this. In the actual videos that we do, that it's going to make a lot more sense. And some of the tenses I have already done. I have already done a few videos on the present continuous, which are out there. Those are a few years old now, but it's still true. And I think also the present perfect, I did a few videos on, which I'm very pleased with how they came out. Yeah, so if you haven't already checked those out, check those out. But we are going to revisit that same content for the course. But do you want to explain a little bit about what perfect means, whether it's past, present, or future perfect?
Sure. So the perfect aspect, or the type of action, means that the whole action, or at least the part I'm talking about, has already happened. So in present perfect, it means I'm talking about now, but the action is mostly in the past. The action is finished, maybe not the whole thing, but enough of it is finished that I can say that much is done. So for instance, I have already eaten, right? I'm talking about right now, but I'm saying that action is done. It's finished. I've eaten and now I'm not hungry. I'm talking about the effect of it. So this concept of perfect, we use the term perfect because one of the meanings of this is finished, right? It's in the past. It's done. It's completed.
Yeah.
And the same is going to be true whether we're talking past, present, or future. If I say it's about lunchtime where I am here, so if I say 4 hours ago I had eaten breakfast. So I'm talking about some time in the past, and I'm saying the action of eating was further back than that. And by the time I'm talking about, it was finished. It was done. I'd eaten. I'm not hungry anymore. I can say the same thing maybe in this evening or before I go to bed tonight. I will have eaten breakfast. Or not breakfast. I will have eaten supper, right, before I go to bed. So at that time I'm talking about, before I go to bed, the action of eating has already happened, and by that time it's done, right? And that's, again, suddenly it's not different whether you're talking about the past, the present, or the future. It's just a perfect tense means an action that's finished. A continuous tense means an action that is in the middle of happening.
Yeah. One of the things that I said in my video that I did on present perfect is that the present perfect, it's called present perfect, but you're sort of talking about the past. But you're talking about how the past has an effect on the present, and that's why it's the present perfect. Would you agree with that description?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like you said, there's lots of different ways to describe things, and different textbooks describe things in different ways, which is where a lot of the confusion comes from.
For sure. And there are lots of different ways to describe this. Vincent is pointing out just right now, like, why do we talk about this as being perfect?
That's a good question. Why do we do that?
Well, do you want the technical explanation or the simple? Do you want the perfect explanation or the simple explanation? The simple is that one of the meanings of the word perfect, especially in the past, perfect means completed. It means finished. You think perfected, right? In English nowadays, we would say perfected when, I'm done with this process. Everything is working perfectly, right? And so that's where we get the concept of perfect. Is it comes from an older meaning for something to be finished.
Yeah, because we don't really use the word perfect as a verb nowadays, or an adjective.
To perfect something.
Well, no, it is an adjective.
It's not used. Yeah.
I guess we do. I guess we do sometimes, yeah.
But it does.
Yeah.
The more technical aspect of that answer, Vince is he wants to know more, is in some languages, instead of having this complicated system of both a time and an aspect, some languages only have the aspect. And for an example, one of the ways they do that is that there will only be two tenses, perfect and imperfect. And again, that means the completed action and an incomplete action. And so we don't have an imperfect aspect in English. The closest we could get would be the continuous. where we're specifically saying the action is not finished yet when I'm talking about something in the
Right.
continuous aspect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we still have the perfect because it's as opposed to imperfect. That's why the word hasn't really changed. Yeah.
So so perfect is like incomplete. Sorry, complete.
Complete.
Continuous is incomplete,
Incomplete. The action's
and
still happening. Yeah.
simple is like where it's not really relevant whether it's complete or not because it's something that's always the case.
Exactly. This is the thing. This is another thing that I think really will make these this make more sense. A lot of times we start with simple. I know some people are wondering, why did you start with continuous and then go to perfect and you skipped simple? Simple is the easy one. But if you're starting to define what is the simple action,
It's difficult.
it's really complicated and it's full of exceptions. And almost every grammar textbook will start with that and start explaining all the different times you use simple, and it's confusing.
Yeah.
The answer is actually very easy. You use simple when you're not trying to say that an action is in the middle and you're not trying to say that it's completed. If you're not specifically trying to say one of those two things, simple. And this is important.
So, for
English,
example, I am Colin.
yes,
That's present simple.
right. You're not talking about when you started being Colin and when you're going to stop being Colin. You're certainly not finished being Colin.
Not
So
yet.
you wouldn't use the continuous or the perfect in that. This to go back to what Vince was asking. In languages that have an imperfect, then that's when you would use that. But in English, the simple doesn't mean it's the imperfect action. It means I'm not saying anything about it. I'm not talking about whether it's finished or unfinished. So simple just means I'm leaving that information out because either it's not important or I just don't want to say one of those two things. An example we were talking about yesterday, if you say, I learned English, the implication is it's sometime in the past, but you didn't say whether you successfully did it or not. Like a lot of people say, I learned English in school, but I don't remember it.
But you are saying that you've stopped learning English.
You're saying that it was in the past. You're not specifically mentioning that you stopped. If you say, I have learned English, you're saying you're done. You've done it. You did it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's different because it's what you're focusing on. By using the perfect, you're really talking about how you've done it. Even if there's part that you still haven't completed yet, you're choosing to talk about the part you did do.
So you probably should never say, I've learned English, unless your English is absolutely 100% perfect and you know every regional variation, you can speak in every accent, which not even I know. I would so yeah.
No, certainly. But see, this is the thing about the perfect tense. It doesn't imply absolute 100% it's over, right? It means whatever the part you're talking about, you're emphasizing the part that's done. So we might say, I am learning English, or we could say, I have been learning English, right? And the have been, you're emphasizing the part you've accomplished, right? It's just the difference between like I did my homework or I have done my homework is, again, you're emphasizing the fact that you've accomplished something. You finished it. It's more positive because you're talking about the part that you've finished. Yeah. So, you could say, I have been building a house. That doesn't mean you're done. It means, but you're talking about the part you've accomplished, right? I am building a house and I have finished the walls, right? You're emphasizing the part that you've actually talked about, and so it makes it easy to remember that the perfect means that the action is finished, but English isn't so picky that it means 100% completely finished. It just means you're emphasizing the part that's finished, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, like I said, it's difficult to get into all the detail in a live stream. So
Absolutely.
but that's just what we've been working on the course the last couple of days. That's that's what is in module 1. So module 1 really does contain those two key elements that are really going to make English make more sense to you. So that's the time. Tense is being made up of just two items: the time and the aspect, and the fact that the key of how important auxiliary verbs are and how that relates to making sentences either positive, negative, or question, depending on the order of those the words,
Yes.
the subject, the auxiliary, and the main verb. Those two things, are really, I think, will really help people. So this is going to be module 1 of the course, which you will have had to pay for to do the full course. But then there will be free versions of the videos as well. So, like I've said,
Absolutely.
you get at the English Language Club. My current philosophy is that the teaching is free, but if you can support us financially, then there is a little bit extra that we can give you, and that in this case will come in the form of the overall structure of the course rather than just individual videos, and then also the exercises that accompany each lesson, which we're working on. So yeah, shall we go to the comments?
Absolutely. So before we start asking or answering some questions, just want to throw out there, everybody, ask your questions now. We'd love to hear where you're from and what you're trying to learn right now. Maybe we can give you some pointers. But yeah, we're looking for questions now, so ask.
Cool. Yes. I see there's already a lot of questions on pronunciation, which we'll get to, even though we're sort of focusing on grammar. But yeah, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
So, that's too far. A lot of just compliments as well. So thank you very much. Theo says, your videos helped me a lot in learning English. Great. That's what they're there for. Your IPA was so amazing for us. And I also like the British accent. That's great. Tony has an American accent. So I've always thought English Language Club shouldn't really focus on British or American. It should be looking at English as an international language, but inevitably, being British myself and being the one who appears on camera, British English is what comes across.
Yes.
But well, until last week when you were on one of my videos. So
I suppose so. Yes.
yeah, so it won't always be just focusing on British, but a lot of people do like British English.
Oh, British English is beautiful. Yeah, everyone loves British English. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I like American English too, I think the ways in which it's different. I mean, and this is a big debate, what's better, British or American?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it's a silly debate, really, because it doesn't matter. But I like American English because it is, to me, like an update, an improvement, every time you have a different pronunciation or a different word for something, if it's a different word, it is more descriptive. For example, sidewalk. We say pavement in British English. You say sidewalk. Well, that makes more sense. It's at the side of the road, and it's where you walk. Whereas
there's lots of different kinds of pavement. Yeah.
Yeah, or the trunk of a car you talk about. We have the boot. I mean, it's got nothing to do. A boot's a type of thing you wear on your foot. What's that got to do with the thing at the back of the car where you put your suitcases? Well,
right. Whereas a trunk is a large box, even in British English, right? Like a large suitcase.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and every time the American English is different. It's something like that. It's more literal. It's more easy to understand. And when it comes to the pronunciation, it's more phonetic. So yeah, British English is great, but American English has got some advantages. I'll be honest.
And don't forget we talk about these as if they're the only two. I
of
actually
course.
live in Canada, and Canadian English is a little bit of an in-between. Most of the spelling is more similar to British, even though most of the pronunciation is more similar to American. And of course, there's Australian, New Zealand English, and then some of the most places where most English speakers in the world live, places like Nigeria and Pakistan and India, obviously have their own take on English as well. And so, yeah, English really is a global language, and to just focus on one kind of it kind of does it a disservice.
So while we're talking about different types of English and pronunciation, we got another question from sorry if I mispronounce your name, Prachish, I think it is, who says, hello sir, so tell me how to focus on pronunciation. I want to catch the British accent. By the way, I love your videos. Well, thank you very much. So well, you're doing the right thing. I think the way to focus on pronunciation is to watch my videos. No, what I mean is to look at each, to break it down. And that's what most of my videos are about, the International Phonetic Alphabet, and that breaks down the pronunciation into the 44 different sounds that we use, and that's the way to do it. And also to think about it as a physical thing. You're not making sound. I mean, you are, but that's not what you're actually doing. What you're actually doing is something physical. You put your tongue here, or you put your tongue there, or you do this with your lips, or you do that with your lips. You've got to think about the physical aspect, because that's what makes the sound.
Yes.
So that would be my answer to that. Superwolf says, I love this guy. I'm not sure which one of us you're talking about. Probably you.
No, I'm sure it's you.
No, it's you.
I've only been on 2 videos so far. And we already talked, Fio was talking about the 12 tenses and the 9 tenses, yeah.
Yep. Okay, another, let's see. So in my, some Ajay boys, good boys, sorry. In my opinion, present perfect is not about time of activity when we do, but just a statement regarding to the activity that we've already done. Does it make sense? Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at there. Yeah.
And that's the same kind of thing that we're kind of getting at, or what we were talking about towards the end, is it's really a difference sometimes in what you're emphasizing. Like, I ate breakfast, or I have eaten breakfast. The action is the same, but I'm emphasizing something different, right? So yeah.
And you're really talking about now.
Right. Yeah. And again, so this is important. The time part of tense, the past, present, or future, isn't about when the action happened. It's about when you're talking about. So I ate breakfast means I'm talking about that in the past. So I would use it in a sentence where maybe I am talking about that time in the past. Like, I ate breakfast while it was still dark, right? I'm talking about a time in the past. Whereas I have eaten breakfast, I'm talking about now. So I would use that in a sentence where I'm talking about now. Like, I have eaten breakfast so I can go for a walk, or I have eaten breakfast so I don't need a snack, right? You're talking about now, and even though the action is in the past, you're talking about how it's affected you now, right? So that's important. Time means when you're talking about, not when the action happened. It's a good observation, AJ.
Yeah. Cool. So moving on, we've talked about accent, and Tapas Mondal was asking about that. And Bharati says, we've been watching the live stream class since 9:30 p.m. So yeah, sorry, we did delay slightly the start time. But so sorry about that. If that's what you're referring to, I don't know what time it is.
Could it be the time zone as well?
Yes, the time zone.
Yeah, because I think that was about when we were talking about how long we had.
Yes,
started,
they might just be giving a sample question.
But if you have been listening for several hours, then that's amazing. What a compliment. Also, we did want to say we're probably going to shift the times of these live streams around a little bit so that we can hit people all over the world. That's one of the interesting things about having a YouTube channel on this, is people all over the world are trying to learn English and trying
Yeah.
to improve their English. There's, millions of people in the United States and the UK and Canada and Australia that are trying to improve their English as well.
Mm.
So it's all over the world. So we will try to maybe move the live stream around and find some times that will work for different people.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see what other comments we got.
I wanted to read this one from Vince PPMI, the Hello English Language Club. Vince here. Verb tenses have made me tense, has had made me tense, is making me tense, and will continue to make me tense, and should be more explained. I definitely agree with you there. Tenses make me tense too.
Yeah. So now let me try this name. Sorry if I get this wrong, which I probably will. Mahalakshmi Enterprises. How to pronounce T in the English accent. So, I mean, do you mean T as in the phoneme or T as in the letter T? Because it would be different. Because a lot of the time, especially in British English, like I just did there, when I said British, I almost didn't say it. Didn't say the T. I should say British. That would be the correct way. That's what I want to hear myself saying. But I often hear myself saying British. Yeah, I'm British. I'm not. So yeah, we do often drop the T's. Maybe that's what you're referring to. And what about in American English? Is the T different between British and American, Tony?
I don't think it's particularly different. The letter T is pronounced T. It's a dental, and so there's not a whole lot of variation that could go in it. The biggest difference is, like you said, there's a kind of a softer version of it that a lot of people will say is wrong. I think it's different and it's used in different ways. If you go around saying better all the time, people aren't necessarily. It's not going to sound more normal than if you're saying better. Like if you listen, there's no T when I say that, better. It's more of a D sound, and that's fine. It's just a softer.
I guess it's sort of more pure, but not more natural necessarily.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that's important, and again, why we choose to focus on general understanding instead of all of the tiny exceptions, is sometimes exactingly correct doesn't sound more normal. One of the things later is, I saw someone pointing out yes, Vince again was talking about we want to sound normal, which is why I want to focus on the accent, and that's very understandable, and that's totally okay. And a lot of your videos have particularly been helping people with that. And this course and what we're talking about now and these kind of big ideas about sentence structure is targeted at people to help them sound more normal, more like native, natural, comfortable speakers, but not in how you pronounce the words, but how you put together your sentences. Yeah. How you say things so that you will not be making mistakes that a native speaker will notice the mistake, but they might not be able to explain why it's a mistake because they haven't really dug into the grammar, but they'll still notice.
Because living here in the UK, I meet people who've lived here for decades and they speak very good English, even though it's as a second language, but they still make mistakes with this stuff. They still use the wrong auxiliary verb, with the right tense, or so this stuff, if you want to sound natural and fluent, then it's really important to get this stuff right, because just one little mistake, it doesn't matter how perfect your accent is or anything like that. If you use the wrong auxiliary verb or the wrong form or the wrong tense in the wrong context, then it really makes a difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So it looks like a lot of people are after British accent videos in particular, so that's that. If you check out my all of my other videos on phonetics, I think going back to what we were saying about having to, it's like you have to know the rules in order to break the rules. You can break the rules. You can, like with the letter T. Sometimes we don't always say T. We do sometimes skip it out. or it's sometimes softer. But I feel like in order to do that correctly, you have to sort of know the rule first.
Yes.
And that's what all my videos are about. My videos, I would say, are I've had to sort of choose one form of English, and I've chosen RP, which is received pronunciation. Sometimes people think of that as like the Queen's English, or sort of sounding quite posh, but it's not really. It's what it is just it's just the regular pronunciation. It's the least rule breaking.
Yes, exactly.
When it comes to the phonemes and pronunciation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So much so that even people in North America find it that way. They say, oh, it's the most kind of normative, to the point that I grew up in an area where a lot of people pronounce things very loosely, would not necessarily be the way they are. You'd learn it in a book. And oftentimes when I was young, people sometimes even thought, oh, do you have a little bit of a British accent? No, I don't have anything remotely approaching a British accent. But because I spoke English that was more like closer to normative, closer to not breaking the rules, in their mind, that made it sound British. And so there is definitely something to that. Yeah. But certainly,
but isn't it funny though that
a reputation?
Yeah, isn't it funny though that it's at the same time as that being true, like American English kind of breaks those pronunciation rules more, but at the same time, with the American spelling is more phonetic and things, so it does obey the phonetics a little bit more than British English.
Absolutely.
So it's very confusing.
And see, so that's like some of the rules. Okay, so for instance, there have been a couple of comments here about Vince was saying, I have been building a house, or I had been building a house. Are the have and the had superfluous? Are they just unnecessary? And the answer is no, they're not. But one of the things that tends to happen as we drift further from the specific rules is you get oversimplifications. So sometimes simplification can make things easier. Sometimes it actually doesn't. You'll find a lot of people that never really use all of the tenses. There's loads of people who probably never or extremely infrequently would use a present continuous. Everyone uses, but maybe a future continuous or a past perfect. People wouldn't use them. There's loads of people who would almost never, if never, use a future perfect or something like a past perfect continuous. So some simplification actually means you're able to say fewer things. There's fewer specific nuances of meaning that you can say if you simplify your language. But then sometimes you get simplifications like the spelling becomes easier or the pronunciation becomes more phonetic. So there's some pros and cons there. The simplification.
Yeah, definitely. A quick shout out here because one of the English Language Club members is watching or was watching. So Sai Prasad Good. I hope I've pronounced your name right. You're very welcome. Thank you for being a member. So just so that everyone knows, you can be a member of the English Language Club on YouTube. There's only a handful of members at the moment, but I am planning to do some a little bits of exclusive content, some behind the scenes videos. I'll probably do one today after this live stream, and also when we launch the course, I'm going to do anyone who's a member at any level is going to get something special. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but it is going to be definitely worth the membership fee, which is there's 3 levels. The lowest is $1.99, and then I think it's $4.99 and $8.99. So if you do want to support what I'm doing, then that's a great way to do that, and you will get something in return for it once we launch the course. So at the moment, a lot of the work we're doing is not appearing on the YouTube channel. apart from these live streams. But we are sort of writing lots of videos and making lots of videos, but we're not putting them out yet until they're all ready, because they're going to go out as a batch.
Yes.
And there will be, like I said, there will be the free versions as well. So you won't have to be a member. The English Language Club, the teaching is free. It's just the exercises and the overall course structure is what you get when you pay for the course, and you also get to help out. That's the main thing,
right.
really.
Yes.
But yeah, there will be free versions. But the videos in the courses they won't have the ads, and they won't talk about. They won't say go to the website for more things, because we know that you're already there. So it will be a more efficient way of getting through the same content.
Yes.
Great. So yes. So check out the memberships.
For sure. Yeah. We've got some more interesting questions here. Syed Munawar is asked, have you taken food? Do you say yes I did or yes I have? This is a little bit of an issue of formality. It's more formal to say, by the way, we would say, have you eaten?
We don't take food in English. We have food.
Right. Very rarely you'll hear something like, have you taken tea or something like that. But that's not.
That's old fashioned.
It's old fashioned. Yeah. And so nowadays we would say have. Have you eaten, or have you had lunch?
Have you had tea? Have you had lunch? Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you had enough?
Had enough. And in which case the answer would be to say, yes, I have. But you will also sometimes hear people say, did you eat? Right? Without being as formal. Rather than, have you had lunch? They'd say, hey, did you eat? In which case it's fine to say, I did. So some of this is a formal versus informal thing. But generally speaking, this is an easy question to answer, because the answer is however they said it.
Yeah, well,
have you eaten?
This is actually a fantastic question for what we've been talking about, because it gets to the heart of how auxiliary verbs are the key to tense. So if somebody asks you a question in the perfect tense, have you lived here for very long? You need then you would need to answer in the present perfect tense. I've lived here for 6 years. Have you had enough? Yes, I have. You wouldn't say, have you had enough? Yes, I did. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So yeah, exactly. You answer with the same auxiliary verb because you need to answer in the same tense. And I remember at a friend's wedding, the vicar was saying, they say, do you take this person to be your wife? And then there was like some debate about, because this was before the wedding, that there was some debate about whether they should respond I will or I do. And the vicar had some nonsense response that didn't make any sense about, and I was like, no, you answer. If the vicar says do you say I do. If he says will you say I will. It's as simple as that, because you're answering. As simple as that. You're answering in the same tense. It doesn't make, if you answer in a different tense, you're not answering the question. You're answering a different question. So,
yes, and it's very important, because even though the action is the same, like the verb you're talking about, kind of the extra information about what the person means is in what tense they use, and therefore in the auxiliary verb. Have you eaten is a subtly different question from did you eat. Have you eaten, because it's talking about the current, you're talking about now, and you're talking about the effect of, is this action finished? Really, they're asking you, are you hungry? Do you want to eat? Right? That's the difference between did you eat and have you eaten. Sometimes it just becomes interchangeable. But it's a really good example of how technically which auxiliary verb you use and which tense you use does change what you're actually meaning when you say it. So it's a good question. I really am glad that you asked this question. It's an excellent one.
Now, Suwana, I think I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Suwana Kano something, sorry, has got a great question here. She said, please correct me if I'm wrong. Perfect equals complete, continuous equals not complete, present equals all. Well, you should say simple. Present simple equals always, and yes, that's pretty much spot on.
Right, and there's exceptions to that,
Yes.
and there's the way I prefer to think of simple is it's true what you're saying, but I think it's easier give it as just that you're not specifying whether it's completed or incomplete. You're just talking about the action. You're not giving any extra information about whether it's completed or not.
Right.
But yes, that always is definitely one of the main ways we use the simple tense.
Yeah. So in the context in the context of a present simple sentence, like if I said I live in the UK, it's not relevant how long how long I've lived here, or the fact is I am now.
Yeah, you're not talking about that right now. If you were talking about it, you would have used a different tense. You would say, I have lived in the UK for, but since you're not talking about it, you use the simple. I live in the UK.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
And then if I use the past simple, I could, because I haven't always lived in the UK, I could say I lived in South America. In that sentence, then we don't know when, because I haven't said when, because that's not relevant to the
or for how long.
Or for how long. I'm just saying that it happened.
Yes, you know that it's in the past.
Yeah, so I'm choosing to stress that I lived in South America. I'm not choosing to sort of to go into detail about how long, or things. I might do that later, in which case I would start using different tenses.
You'd probably use a perfect tense. That's usually when we would use a perfect, when we're talking about how long or something like that.
Yeah, so I'd say I had lived there for 6 years, 7 years when I decided to come back.
Exactly. Yeah. So going back to the bit about talking about have you eaten, we got a couple of more recent comments here. Vince said, regarding food, I've heard do lunch instead of have lunch. And he said it's more of a California thing, I guess. That is, again,
that's very common. It's not just American.
Variations. Yeah, that's totally true. Like, again, you'll hear other ways of saying that, and by no means are those the only ways of doing it. In which case,
I would say that's like an idiomatic expression almost.
Yes, it is.
So in the sense that
lunch isn't a verb. So
yeah.
Well, it can be, I guess, but that's not what they mean.
Yeah, so idiomatic expressions are sort of where we break the rules. We use words that don't have their normal meaning. The grammar is not necessarily less likely to be followed to following the rules. So yeah, do lunch is certainly almost a slang.
It is, and it has a more specific meaning too. It doesn't. You wouldn't use it in all contexts.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Ansi Monaghan says, have you had food? And then is the correct answer, yes, I had. This is another very key question here. The verb here is had. That's the main verb. But that is not the auxiliary verb. The auxiliary verb is have. So you would say, yes, I have. Right? So you're going to repeat the same auxiliary verb back to them that they used to you.
Yeah.
So not yes, I had, but yes, I have. You could, of course, say yes, I've had food, right? You could say both the auxiliary and the main verb again. But the key here is identifying which one is the auxiliary verb. Oftentimes we kind of ignore those and they say, oh, they're not as important.
They're
this
super
is one
important.
Of our big ideas.
They're the most important. Yeah.
They're very important, exactly. They may be the most important thing for really understanding and taking your English kind of to the next level.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in this course, we're not really going into vocabulary at all. We use lots of different verbs as examples, but it's not about teaching you lots of different verbs. It's all about teaching the fundamental way in which we use the verbs, the structure, and because that's the thing that people really make mistakes with and don't fully understand, even after speaking and studying English for quite a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have some more questions here. Do we want to talk about UK versus English accent and how one turned into another? This could be a whole question.
Yeah. Well, to be honest,
we could go into more detail.
Well, do you know? Because I don't really know for sure. I remember. Yeah, I don't have the comment in front of me, but Have
Let's
you
see,
got it there?
Vince PPMI said, Mr. Monroe, we'd like to sound normal, which is why we want to focus on the
Oh
accent.
yeah.
By the way, the American English accent, from which UK English did it really descend? Did George Washington speak in received pronunciation English?
Well,
Um,
it's a. I mean, it didn't descend from one particular place. That's the
no.
thing. And also,
Well,
since then, in the last few hundred years, English, the way I think the accents we have in England have changed quite a lot.
yes, more than some of the American accents, in fact. Yeah.
Right. So, but listening to and yeah, so America, there's lots of different American accents. So maybe, and I think it's maybe in like Boston, there was a lot of Irish people, so the way they speak is more influenced by Irish accents. And I know that I live close to a city called Bristol, which is in the west of England, and they have quite a particular accent. Although I grew up nearer London, so I don't have the Bristol accent. But I think and Bristol is quite famous for being its history of like shipping and it has a famous port there, although it's not so active nowadays. But a lot of the people that went to America went from Bristol, so there's a lot. I think there's some Bristolian accent in American English as well.
Yes.
A lot of pirates came in and out of Bristol. That's what.
Yes.
And in fact, if you want to know what a Bristol accent is, imagine a pirate who are
Except not actually saying "r." But,
yeah, well, it's a little bit like that. They sort of all the words are all a little bit curly like that. That's
yes.
sort of a
Yeah.
Bristol accent. I'm not going to do it anymore because it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and this is definitely true. And it's not just English. There are parts of the U.S. where the English the accent is influenced by Dutch or influenced by German or influenced.
So there's
by,
other
by
influences
Spanish.
in American English too. Yeah.
So American English is really hard to kind of trace. Sometimes you can just kind of look at statistics of where people settled in different parts of the U.S.
Yeah. I heard that there is a not an app but a website where you can sort of do a questionnaire where it will basically say to you, I can't remember what it's called, but it will say to you, when do you pronounce this word
like this or like this?
Yeah, and you do like 10 questions like that, and it will say, oh, you must be from Massachusetts or something, and it's like really surprisingly accurate.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and those kinds of things are really, they are really accurate. A linguist can sometimes nail down where you live to within a few hundred miles. It can be scary how accurate they can get. Yeah.
So somebody also go on. You go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say people were asking about my accent, where I'm from. So
I'm curious to answer that as well.
To answer this for me?
No, to the answer. Sorry.
Oh, right, to the right. Yes. So I grew up near London, so I suppose I had a London accent, but I'm definitely conscious that when I started teaching English, I started losing my London accent, and started to speak a little bit more RP as I was teaching it. So when I'm teaching, I do. I'm less London than I normally am. But even now, if I was to talk to my friends from London, I don't speak. I would go back to having a London accent a bit, but not as much as I used to. I like the way I sound now more, I think. But yeah, my accent is London, but with a bit of RP training, I suppose, through teaching. I hope that answers the question. Let me know. Let me know if you've got any follow-up questions to that. Does that make sense, Tony?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And again, this is, for many people, the question, what kind of accent do you have or what kind of accent do they have, is very simple. But not for a lot of people. Many people have traveled, or many of people have been educated in one way that was different from maybe the way they grew up. Sometimes it's literally as different as maybe one part of the county has a slightly different accent from another part of the county. And if someone who lived in one half but went to school in the other half and then went to university in a different place,
Yeah,
People's accents are a lot more mixed up now than they
and you
were
know,
100 years ago.
in London, London is so multicultural that the idea of accents being regional breaks down. It's not like that, because in one
By
region
neighborhood.
it's not even by neighborhood, because in one neighborhood you could have different cultures, living next door to each other. But
Yes,
within that
absolutely.
neighborhood, you've got lots of people from one culture and lots of people from another culture, and they would have different London accents. Even though they're living in the same place, but their accents. So there's sort of, when you get into London, there's sort of lots of accents layered on top of each other, and the idea of it being regional doesn't really work.
Right. And I think even Vince here's pointing out, talking about code switching, and I think the issue is it's just much more complicated than that. People don't have a single accent often the way they used to. Things are just much more fluid about that.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to point out Gwalior West Zone here is talking about learning English from basics, and whether we could suggest which steps or courses. And then also is asking how can we improve our accent in the busy life, when we are spending most of our time working. How can one improve one's accent? And I'm just going to say, one of the easiest things to do, or one of the best things, is the videos that you already have up, going through each of the individual sounds, so you really know what that sound sounds like when you say
But not just sounds like, but what
but
it
the
feels
physicality
like, the
of it.
physicality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is something it would be really nice if we could do more of, if we ever have the time, is to really go into detail about the physicality of it, and maybe cover English, or British and American English a little bit separately. There was also a question from Nidhi Verma, if I'm saying that correctly. Could we have one video on intonation and stress pattern? And this is another one that English is not as simple as a lot of languages on the intonation and stress pattern. For those of you who don't know, that means, which syllable of a word do you pronounce more strongly? Like, is it better or better? And there are some simple rules to this. And then, of course, there are a lot of exceptions to the rules.
And some complicated rules.
And then there are some very complicated rules. And
Yeah.
in my experience, especially with things like stress, is unless you are a person who really likes to understand very complicated rule sets, the best thing to do is just listen and practice. Because the rules on pronunciation for English can be very crazy. There are some courses you can take. There are, phonetics that you can really dig into, and you'll learn, depending on which letter comes first in a syllable, whether it's stressed more or less. But unless you're really willing to commit to learning all of those rules, it's quite a lot.
And to a certain point, I think those rules are interesting from an academic point of view if you're studying phonetics or you're studying grammar as a subject of interest in itself. But if you're trying to learn English, you're trying to improve your English, it's not necessarily helpful to go that deep. And at the English Language Club, I do want to focus on people learning English as a second language rather than the hardcore phoneticists or the hardcore grammarians. Even though I do get a lot of requests for that type of content, I need to draw a line for what is helpful to people learning English as a second language, because that is our core audience. But we can look at that, yeah.
For sure. And honestly, the where that's actually most useful, and where I see most of the serious discussion about it, other than maybe hobbyists, is in education. When people are really talking about how do we teach, very, very young children, because that's where phonetics and phonology, like, it's easy to just kind of talk to young kids, but sometimes the theories of how you teach or in what orders you teach are affected by these very delicate rules. But also, 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds can learn things that most of the rest of us can't. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it would be really cool if we can continue to dig into more detail about the physical aspect of pronunciation,
Yeah.
because I think that's something you can actually practice and learn. And
Yeah,
in
that's the
some
key.
languages,
That's the
that's
key
how
to
it's taught.
improving your English. Yeah.
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 And it's annoying to me that that's not something that's done particularly much in English. In some languages, that's how they teach it. There's charts on the walls talking about, how to where to put your tongue, and that it can really make it a lot easier to practice using the right sounds.
Mm.
Oh, Groove promo team is
Mm.
talking, asking about how
How
does
to
he
become a
become a
member?
member? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you should have a little button underneath the video that just says join. Is that right? I can't see it myself
Yeah,
because
it's
I'm on.
right next to the subscribe button.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this one. Yeah.
So yeah, click on that and it'll give you some instructions on how to join, and you'll see that there's 3 different levels. So yeah, thank you very much. If you want to join, you'll be very welcome. And like I said, you will get something when this course goes out. And you'll also get there'll be some posts and a few videos that are only for members. But like I've said, the teaching is always going to be for free. What you're going to get is a bit more sort of behind the scenes videos and things like that. Once there's a few more members, then I will do some members only live streams, so we can, I may even figure out if we can take them over to Zoom, so that people can speak and speak to us. We can see their face as well, because that would be nice.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of early days. I mean, I set that up a few months ago. It's been quite slow to take off. There's a handful of members, which is awesome. I really appreciate that. But things like building a channel like this is really it's a marathon, not a sprint. But yeah, so if you want to help out, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. So that's probably we've gone about just over an hour. We're going to be back again next week. I'm not sure exactly what the time will be, but like Tony said, we want to mix it up so that different people in different parts of the world can join us. But it will be Tuesday, probably. I'll set up the live stream very soon, so you'll be able to see. That it's coming up. If you go to englishlanguageclub.co.uk/live, there I'm going to embed whatever the next live stream is going to be. So that's the place to go to see when the next live stream is going to be. And we'll be talking about module 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be talking about the present continuous tense and the present simple tense.
Yeah.
In more detail, and anything else that you want to talk about. So
yeah, we really just want to hear your questions, and it'll also help us kind of shape what we're going to be working on next, maybe.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.